The Retail Ramble podcast is brought to you in association with Essential Retail Magazine and RBTE, Europe's largest end-to-end retail technology show.
Hello and welcome to this episode of The Retail Ramble. I'm Caroline Baldwin, I'm the editor of Essential Retail and your host for you today. I've just sat in on a really interesting roundtable hosted by Criteo, and we've talked all about what is omnichannel basically. We've gone right down back to the ground roots of trying to figure out what it is and how are retailers achieving this. So we've had a really nice chat with about 10 or so retailers and industry experts, and I've pinned 3 of these experts down to chat about this. Pretty much again, we've chosen our favourite sections of this roundtable to share with our readers and listeners out there today. So I'm just going to introduce the gentlemen that I have around the table with me now. So I've got John Gillan, who's the MD at Criteo. Thanks for joining us, John, and thank you so much for hosting and inviting us. We also have Daniel Bobroff, who's the founder and CEO of Coded Futures, and with us, who was our host for the roundtable earlier on, is Andy Mulcahy, who's the director at IMRG. Hi guys, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Maybe I could just quickly start with, John, could you explain a little bit of what Criteo's been doing in the industry and why you wanted to host the roundtable today, and also I'll then let the other gentlemen as well explain why they're here today and what their interests are.
Sure. So at Criteo, we're on a bit of a mission. And so we're on a mission to actually we've launched to the world our commerce marketing ecosystem. So that is, at Criteo, then we are in a unique position where we work with tens of thousands of our partners, from retailers to travel clients, right through to publishers, right through to brands. And so what we've built is this ecosystem, and with that then we want to see how we can partner and share what our assets with our partners. So at Criteo we have we have a huge amount of data. So we see over 550 billions worth of retail sales. We also have a huge amount of reach. So we see 1.2 billion shoppers, and of those shoppers, then we are able to understand their journeys across devices. So we have a cross-device graph of 700 million shoppers globally. So and with that, we also have this technology layer as well to our business. So this commerce marketing ecosystem we've launched, and we're looking to partner with business, and we already are partnering with a number of businesses out there, so that we are providing them with insights around how people are shopping. We are doing it at scale across globally, cross devices, and also then we are partnering with them from a technology perspective in terms of how then they can utilise our technology to truly inspire their shoppers, so that they can actually understand how they're shopping with them, they can reach them cross-device, across the globe, and then inspire them to purchase.
It all comes down to the data, which I'm sure we will hit on in a moment. Andy, could you just explain IMRG for our readers who haven't heard? I'm sure they have.
Assuredly, you have heard of IMRG, but it's a trade association for online retailers. The main thing that we do that you'd probably recognise us for is that we track the market. So retailers give us their sales data, and we benchmark them in loads of sales performance KPIs, but also a lot of stuff that's more marketing led. There's hundreds of KPIs that we actually track. In terms of why I'm involved in this thing, really I'm just an industry gadabout that jumps on anything that's going.
You're the numbers man, you've got a lot of numbers.
Indeed, I'm a numbers man. So, but really it's because it's about omnichannel, which is kind of a big interest area for me. I find it fascinating because it's been around for years, and yet we're still talking about it as if it's something that's slightly out of reach. It still seems to be a slightly mythical concept that I don't think anyone's really nailed yet.
And Daniel, tell us a little bit about Coded Futures. You were previously at ASOS Ventures, is that correct?
Yes, I sort of found my way into retail at a later stage in my life. Spent probably about 16 years making video games, which some of your listeners may have played actually, which was a lot of fun. But then at Nick Robertson's request actually, started to work on scouting emerging and disruptive talent within fashion and retail, and had me sit on many a plane for many an hour, but found an incredible amount of disruption really across the board. And really every aspect of retail now is being disrupted by new and innovative thinking, which was really important for ASOS and increasingly important for many retailers with whom I work now in the coded futures vein. So I'm heavily involved in that sort of disruptive and innovative
on the pulse
space.
of the new technologies.
I'd like to think so. I often describe myself as a scout.
As a scout. Well, now we all know each other and we know exactly what we're doing. I wanted to start off with one topic that really piqued my interest, and something we've been talking about quite a bit at Essential Retail is the whole idea of retail collaboration. You see acquisitions, you see Sainsbury's, Argos, and even partnerships with retailers like EE being a part of Sainsbury's stores, and there's so many other examples of retailers teaming up together, and I have an inkling that this is in order to compete with the digital titans, you called them, John, didn't you, out there, the Amazons of the world, the Alibabas. How on earth can you compete with a company which isn't making much profit and has an R&D budget which is almost, God knows how much it is? So John, you called them digital titans. What are retailers supposed to do? Is this collaboration idea sensible?
Yeah, I mean these companies they're very impressive. I mean, if you look at the Alibaba wouldn't consider themselves a retailer; they consider themselves a data company. Mm-hmm. You look at Amazon, and they consider themselves very much the most customer-centric retailer or customer-centric business on the planet. So how do you compete with them? Well, if you look at some of the numbers there, I mean, Amazon are sort of 55% of all kind of new purchases in the US, are going to Amazon. So everybody else is competing just for the other half, the share. And for me, it comes down to understanding the shopper and providing a truly good, great, amazing customer experience. And to understand the shopper, it all comes back to the data. Have you got the data to be able to understand those shoppers and how they how to shop with them? So for me, that's the piece. That's how you can kind of compete. You can create a great shopping experience, but you need to understand the shopper behaviour, and you can only do that via the data. And at Criteo, we've been partnering with retailers and brands exactly that on them sharing the data with us, and then us passing back the data back to them, but a more comprehensive data set, so they can understand more holistically how people are shopping across the countries. So for me, that's how you can compete. Is looking at the data and creating a great customer experience.
Andy, you mentioned, it's kind of part of your business model, I suppose, at IMRG as well, sharing data and giving it back to your members. But you mentioned a retailer that was was it John Lewis you mentioned earlier, that was encouraging retailers to work together and partnership, be that with data or be it to fulfil orders or such.
Yeah, I think there's certain areas where it's a bit more possible for collaboration than it is in others, and I think the John Lewis example was around click and collect, because there's such a huge amount of scale going through that now. So at the moment we're tracking click and collect sales for multi-channel retailers, 1 in 3. So it's a really, really big thing, and obviously there's a hell of a lot going through that. So how can they divide that up amongst themselves in a non-competing kind of way to fulfil that? There's always actually been an appetite for collaboration in retail. It's just that it's been specific to certain areas.
What kind of areas are we talking?
So when I sit in rooms of retailers, if you get a group of logistics people together, they're quite willing to work together and share information, because ultimately they're all using the same carriers. So if one kind of messes up, it causes a problem for all of them. Mm-hmm. I think you get a similar kind of thing with fraud prevention teams and things like that, because they're all being targeted by the same criminals, etc. So sharing that information is probably quite useful. I think sharing between e-commerce teams and things like that has traditionally been a lot more difficult than that. But ultimately,
because they want to keep hold of their own secrets, or are they a bit worried about? Well,
retail is a very competitive space. I mean, let's not forget that, and you don't really want to let anybody else have a competitive advantage over you. But I suppose where we are today is that it is just a big data game, and the more that the better that you can understand the data, the more you're going to get out of it. So for years we've been running a benchmark where people do put their data into it because they're willing to do it. It's aggregated, the stuff they get back, but understanding your performance is incredibly important today. But I think really whoever you are, I mean, as long as you've got the basics covered, you know, you can kind of be all right. I mean, ultimately, retail is about selling stuff that people want, and as long as you're selling something that someone wants and you're doing it in a pretty clever way, then you should be okay today. You know, it's not kind of all doom and gloom.
It's interesting, we had the CEO of Westfield speak at Shop Talk last week, and he was talking about this idea that his retailers in his department store, the malls, should share their data with him in order to create a better shopping journey for the customer visiting Westfield. And when he mooted this about 18 months ago at NRF, a lot of people were like, really? You know, River Island's going to share data with New Look, and they're going to be able to, these competing fashion retailers are going to share all of this data. But now, apparently, he's saying that a lot of the retailers are on board. I don't know if that's some kind of threat against the rent or what he's managed to get them on board for, but do you think that's possible, Daniel? What's your thoughts there?
Well, I think that collaboration as a theme is now sort of coming into, you know, sort of direct focus for many retailers, and that has been driven by a number of factors. Firstly, many of them have been replatforming for a couple of years now, and the reason that they've done that is because they've recognised that their tech stack has become incredibly more complex than it was, say, 2005 to 10, that everything is connected. And the other aspect to this is that the customer has, you know, en masse shifted to mobile computing, so that the use of the mobile smartphone really has now become the primary device. Most retailers are reporting upwards of 50% of traffic through a mobile device, in excess of 50% of sales through a mobile device, and the customer has a very different perspective on this. They are expecting, you know, increasingly an experience, because we live in a world which has shifted dramatically from, you know, a hit-driven world that I grew up in, which was a world of scarcity. You know, it was difficult to find things, to a world of abundance where you can find anything you want at any time, pretty much at any price. So therefore the key differentiator for many retailers now is going to be experience. That experience is both digital, what does that look like, and it's equally physical in terms of what's the experience inside a store. So all of those things combined, retailers realise that they simply don't have the resources or the talent or the time to develop the sort of very sophisticated technologies that are needed to...
They need to share then, and it's kind of like an open data approach.
Of course, so they you know, to take that sort of naive view of I'll build it all in-house has sort of gone, you know, with the birds, really.
It's interesting that you mentioned replatforming. We're speaking to a lot of retailers that are moving on to new websites, and depending on which vendor they choose to go on, we're seeing a bit of a trend of people moving from in-house development to a vendor, because you can speak to, the vendor can put you in touch with other companies that are struggling with the same issues, and also if there's a problem they'll know that they'll get a patch fixed immediately, or they'll get the incremental updates, and it all goes back to that data sharing point again. Well,
it's also part of that whole idea of collaboration, and that collaboration also extends internally as well. You know, it's important that retailers start to build sort of cross-functional teams where there are different views being expressed, because
the IT team knowing what's going on in the marketing.
Well, precisely, or that the marketing is brought forward in the process, that you're not just building something, throwing it over to the marketing team and saying, well, you know, sell that. You know, they have to be involved far, far earlier. So having, for them, one of the most important things is having a view of the customer that is beyond their brand universe. If all they've got to go on is what the customer does within their sort of website or within their app, you know, that's quite limited. They need to know more than that. So what Criteo is doing is really giving that visibility, that opportunity to power some of the sort of digital customer experiences and physical customer experiences with that sort of awareness of what the customer does when they're not shopping with you.
And John, what are your CMOs telling you? What are they saying?
So we actually we did some research. We commissioned it, and Forbes did the research on our behalf. They exactly that. They wanted to explore this exactly people's thoughts around data, and in particular data collaboration. So they interviewed 500 CMOs across the globe in 5 major markets, and the results were outstanding. There were actually, when we looked at it globally, 71% of chief marketing officers were either willing to share their data or were already sharing their data.
Wow,
and when we looked at that in the UK, it was actually the number's higher. It was up there at 80% plus.
Goodness.
And but actually, I mean, it's for us as a business. Then we've already, for the last few years, we've had tens of thousands of our partners have already been sort of passing back the data. And they're happy to do so as long as they see the value add, as long as then we're returning that data and showing the value add that we can pass back to them. And so we've had, whether it's partners such as Travel Republic, who wanted to understand their attribution more effectively. So again, we passed back our shopper graph to them so they could understand how their shoppers were shopping across their site. And for them, then they could see the value add because we're able to show, or they were able to understand that mobile was having 42% more touch points in terms of impacting that customer journey. So therefore, they're able to change their marketing investment to invest more into mobile to drive further sales.
I suppose you need a tech-savvy CEO at the top to allow you. You mentioned that staff are already all willing. So potentially a lot of those people could be willing to do that, but somebody at the top saying no. Do you think that's going to be a problem, or do you think now in a digital world that CEOs are on board with all of this?
Well, I sort of say that innovation today is no longer a job title, it's a mindset. Mm-hmm. And so having a culture that accommodates that mindset across the organisation is absolutely vital, and of course that is determined by the CEO. So they need to be brave, and sometimes that can be challenging within the sort of structure of the sort of quarterly results that they're expected to provide, and the challenges that shareholders will naturally put on them. But they need to be brave, and they need to sort of hold their course. The important thing to sort of say about this is that in many organisations, failure is sort of penalised, it's looked down upon, it's criticised. But
not the case in the startup world, though, is it?
No, it's absolutely not. And many of these kind of ideas that we're playing with, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtual reality, augmented reality, we're not just going to get there in one step. It is going to be necessary for us to try things and fail. And when we fail, we're going to learn. And that learning is going to be our unit of progress. So ultimately, if the CEO is going to create a culture which prevents that learning from happening because people are too scared, they're too worried about their job, we are all human beings at the end of the day. We will react in emotional ways if we're put in that kind of environment. Then that kind of innovation simply won't happen.
Andy, are you seeing many of your members trying out all these new innovations or being restricted?
Well, I think the point raised there about trying these things and kind of learning from them. I think the ultimate one there is virtual reality. I remember virtual reality when I was a teenager, and it was rubbish because you used to go into an arcade and there was a slightly more expensive thing, and it would be a flight simulator or whatever you could sit in, and it cost £4. But then it kind of went away, and now it seems to be back well and truly. But I think you've got to be realistic about use of virtual reality in retail, and I think some people are going to get it spectacularly wrong, and you're going to get a few people who are going to get it really right. But there's going to be a lot of casualties. I mean, if you can use virtual reality to go to the moon or to go to the bottom of the sea, then that's great.
Yeah, which Eurostar actually did. Eurostar were doing some interesting things over the summer where somebody said that their child was really upset that they couldn't see the fishes when they were going through the tunnel, so they did some kind of augmented reality, virtual reality. So you can see, go on Eurostar.
So you can see how that would work for.
Yeah.
But if you're selling paper or paper clips or a sofa or something, how are you going to use it? And I can see that some fashion retailers they try and use it as a catwalk and all that. I think there's scope for that, but I don't think everyone can do that. I don't think everyone can make it work. It's a bit gimmicky, and I think some people, you'll use it once and you think, it's all right, but you won't use it again, and it's quite an expensive little toy.
See, I disagree fundamentally. I'm sorry. I lived through the shift from, I was a game developer.
I was about to say, you're in the games industry.
And early 90s, we made games in 2D, pretty much like the games you'll play, many of the games you'll play on your phone. And there was a shift brought about by Sony to 3D, and that shift was all-conquering. I mean, it went at light speed. 2D games were so yesterday's news, nobody was interested in them. Every game from that moment on was 3D. What I would say to Andy is that it clearly isn't going to be suitable for everybody in the short term. In the long term, it's industry changing. Whether we're all going to sit there with masks on our face,
That's the
being
thing,
immersive,
isn't it?
I
Yeah.
have my doubts. But whether it's a combination of augmented reality or the more immersive virtual reality, undoubtedly these are going to help us as retailers digitally to tell stories. And our storytelling ability really is at the core of our ability as a retailer. We've always been storytellers. So what I would like to see is that the use of digital becomes more focused on telling stories, which is really about the experience that the customer wants more and more, and less about the efficiency drivers, which are important, but really as far as the customer is concerned, it's much more about those stories. And I think VR is an incredible tool in that regard.
So you disagree, but you really do come down to the same principle, which is don't do it for the sake of doing it, do it when there's a reason.
I think there's still going to be a lot of casualties along the way, is the point. I mean, yes, if you can use it for good storytelling, that's a great thing, and some people will get that right, I think, but some people will also get it pretty spectacularly wrong, and it'll be a very expensive mistake for them. In the longer term, maybe when it becomes when you've got some real good use cases of how this stuff's going to make things happen, then maybe. But I think between now and then, I think there's a rocky highway.
Yeah, but again, you have to be prepared to fail fast. You have to be prepared to trial these things, because you simply won't find out otherwise what works, what doesn't work. And it's always worth a bit of light entertainment to go and look at the sort of time capsule and see how some of the incredible online retailers that we know today, what they look like in 2001.
Yeah, very true, very true. It's an interesting. My biggest bugbearer with the virtual reality is. I think I was walking down an expo show floor and saw someone showcasing, oh yes, you can virtually sit on your sofa and walk down an aisle in a supermarket to buy your products. Why would I want to do that? That's the part of the shopping that I don't actually enjoy. But then using that technology, as you say, the fail fast element, if the retailer can use that for merchandising and work out which cereal boxes look great on the shelf, and while they're in Birmingham and their HQ is, I don't know, in New York, then that's quite interesting.
But if I asked you whether or not you would quite like to go shopping with your best girlfriend,
who's in New York and I'm in
who's
Birmingham,
in New York and you're in Birmingham, and
be...
you'd like to try things on and see which outfits worked for you and have her impact, her response immediately,
that's
you'd love
different.
that. You'd love that. So, potentially virtual reality has this ability to be the most social platform of all time, which is not my words, they're Mark Zuckerberg's words. Before he
is he trying to sell it by any chance?
Well, that was when he bought Oculus.
I was about to say before or after.
But there's some challenges there. Like they've not known what the input device is. Are these things I carry in my hands, or are these kind of sort of, is it Bluetooth? Do I have to click on something? Is it like a virtual kind of, am I going to walk into a wall?
Exactly.
One of the challenges we had was to work out whether or not there was a wall in a physical space. So we worked with, ASOS was one of the first to trial some VR ideas, invested in a company, and again, it was all about learning. It was all about being brave enough to try these things without knowing what the answer holds, but just to improve our ability to get closer to that. And I think bringing it back to the sort of Criteo data set, that data is going to be the oil that powers many of these experiments, if you like.
Well, I was just about to say, bringing it back to the data and the collaboration that we started, that's what I always love about the rambles, they always go off on a really interesting tangent, but to just bring it back to collaboration before we wrap up, say you're a retailer, you've done something really innovative with VR and AR, that's not the kind of thing that you're going to want to share, I presume. Aren't you going to want to keep those secrets? Because where do we stop sharing the information and collaborating?
Well, I think technology should always just be an enabler. Mm-hmm. We should never lead with the technology. Customers will decide, and customers will decide. And as a retailer, you'll know by looking at your data. Yeah. And I think where do you stop in terms of where do you share what's being innovative and what's working? Then I would say there's not a limit. I think I would argue that whether it's fulfillment or whether it's just innovation in store as an industry, there's a huge amount of disruption going on, and those that are prepared to try things, to fail fast, they will survive and thrive. There's in the landscape that we're looking at today, then there are these digital titans. I think for me, then it is around everybody else collaborating and to see how they can add value and work together to be able to kind of compete in tomorrow's world.
And what about today's world? Just think to wrap up, rather than tomorrow's world as in the future, actually tomorrow. I'd like to hear from you guys. What would be the one piece of advice you'd give to retailers wanting to improve their collaboration? Maybe it'd be share an Amazon type locker, or would it be the data a la Westfield? Who would like to? What was one piece of advice?
I mean, it's what works for you, really. I mean, ultimately with this, what you're trying to do is solve problems, increase efficiency, whatever it is, whatever is consistent with your proposition that helps you to move forward, I think is your area of focus.
So do you need to find other retailers that have the same problem as you, basically?
Or other people that will help you find those retailers that have got the same problem as you. We've been aggregating data since 2000. There's people that have been in the index that whole time, so they obviously find that useful.
Yeah.
The difficulty that we always find is to try and launch new metrics that we think are interesting, but we have to get them to all agree to it, and then quite often they'll turn around and say, no, I'm not really bothered about that, which is slightly frustrating from our perspective, but you get to see the bits that they definitely do want to know, and those are the ones that we roll out.
Interesting. What about you, John? What's your piece of advice?
I think it comes down to the test and learn, and to think differently and to do things differently over the next few years. I think if we've done the same as what we've done the last 5-10 years, then I think as retailers, as an industry, I think we will struggle. So I think it would be to exactly that, to test, to learn, to share, to collaborate, and look at the data to understand actually the impact it's having on your business and the impact it's having on the customer experience.
Fantastic. And finally, Daniel.
Yeah, I would reiterate those comments. I would simply add, be brave, create a culture both that's able to take those bets, test and learn, and establish windows on your world. Establish opportunities to build bridges that collaborate with experts who are in particular fields. If that's Criteo within the marketing field, it can be early stage companies in other fields who are doing something particular. Find a way of working with those guys, because they will go much faster than you are able to go on your own.
Fantastic. Well, that's a perfect way to wrap up a really interesting afternoon. I just want to thank Criteo again. Thank you so much for inviting us, and thank you to the gentlemen around the table, Andy from IMRG, John from Criteo, and Daniel from Coded Futures. That's been your episode of the Retail Ramble for this week. Stay tuned, we'll have another episode with you very shortly.